Hi, I'm Kim Garcia, programmer and technical director at NewFest, New York's leading LGBTQ plus film and media organization. Thank you all for joining us and watching Keyboard Fantasies, part of the LGBTQ plus movie club with NewFest. This wouldn't be possible without our amazing partnership with New York Department of Education. I'd love to introduce someone I'm sure many of you are familiar with and beloved by NewFest. Please welcome June Schoenfeld, coordinator of LGBTQ plus programs at the New York Department of Education, who will be moderating this Q&A. Now, please welcome Jude.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. Good afternoon. We're going to be speaking with the director of Keyboard Fantasies, Posy Dixon, who we're really excited is here. So I want to welcome you, Posy. And we're going to have a little conversation about Keyboard Fantasies. I really love this film. I saw it kind of when it came out, and I actually recently rewatched it. So I just want to say I really enjoyed the piece. And we have a lot of students and DOE staff watching, so we're going to have a little conversation. Hello to your cat as well.
Yeah, this is Goat. Very
Goat. I love another animal name for a different animal. You know, that always works well. So I think that the first thing I wanted to know was, when did you first learn about Glenn Copeland and his music, and like, what was your first reaction, and why did it inspire you the way that it did?
It's funny because I can so clearly remember hearing Keyboard Fantasies the first time. I think it was Sunset Village, and I was sitting in the studio and my friend Jim played it. You know, like we always play music in the studio, and I was like, what is this? You know, like who is this? What is this? And I remember Jim being like, it's Beverly Glenn Copeland, because that record was kind of doing the rounds in like nerdy music scenes, you know? So I heard it. And then that was back in maybe like 2016, I think. And I started digging around trying to find more music. And then I eventually found Glenn on Facebook. And I reached out to him because I was working on another project about like inherited musical kind of traits and the sort of importance of music to us as a human species. So I reached out to Glenn to be like, could we just chat about this project? Because I'd seen him talk about it on a YouTube video. And then he wrote back, and we had this like 2-hour-long Skype call, which was like being reunited with the granddad that I never had, you know? Yeah. And then like a real friendship started from there. And I never intended to make a film about him. Like the intention at the beginning was to go and film some music videos for him, because he'd never played that record live before, or not even live, you know, like no one had ever seen him perform those songs. So initially I was like, I want to make music videos. And then when I finally made it to Canada and met him and like met the band, I did one interview and I was like, this might be more than a music video.
Yeah, it was like, and it had elements of that too. I also wanted to know, like, the music is just such a character in this piece. Like, I'm curious about the process of like choosing what performances you were filming. If you had insight into the editing process of that, like, what was choosing the music like for this?
So the whole story, I based the whole story on the music, right? And it was like this whole idea that there was the first half of the film, which was kind of filling you in on the bit of Glenn's life that, you know, that I learned from him when I spent time with him and all the conversations we had in the lead up to filming. And then the second half of the film was this very much like, I was really into the idea of like time travel, and that Glenn's a bit of a time traveler, and that you just like slam into present day and you're on tour with Glenn and his new band. It's never really explained why that happens, you know, it's just happening. And so like the record Keyboard Fantasies, I was always like, this film is about that record, right? It's not actually about like Glenn, it's not a biopic. It's a film about a record and the person that created that and all of the people that have connected through that record, you know? So I had the music as the linchpin, and the whole way through, I like followed music as the guide for the entire film. Insofar as what we filmed, I mean, we made this film on a real like shoestring, you know, we were like filming bits and bits. So the one thing, like everything we filmed is in that film almost, you know, like so few things are on the cutting room floor. Yeah. So when Glenn came to Europe, which is, you know, the entire second half of the film, he came here, he was like, the whole band was staying in my flat, staying with my neighbors upstairs. We all got into my mom's car and went on tour like together. So we shot everything that we could shoot in our short amount of time that we had with them. So yeah.
You got it all and you used it
Yeah.
all.
There actually wasn't that much choice, you know, but God,
Yeah.
the music is so beautiful. And all the music at the beginning of the film is like music that Glenn talked about, you know, like all the
Yeah.
classical music. So it's all the music is just led by what Glenn, everything was led by what Glenn had told me through like hours and hours and hours of just hanging out and talking.
Yeah, I'm curious also, like, from watching the film, what was that like for Glenn? Like, the music, their music being discovered so much later in, like, it kind of seemed like, what was that like for Glenn's music to kind of be, like, rediscovered in that way? I mean, I think that you were saying it, like, it's, it was kind of alive in underground music scenes for a while, but I'm curious that, like, impact that had on Glenn, and how it kind of, like, what people can maybe learn from, like, like, his creative journey in his life, and the fact that, things can come back.
Right. And it's like, you're so out of control. And it's funny because when I first started talking to Glenn, he hadn't met that band yet. And I think it was like just when the record was like starting to get some traction. And I was like, I want to come and film you playing Keyboard Fantasies. And Glenn was like, I've got loads of new music I want you to film. You know, he was a bit like, he was like, honey, that was ages ago. Like, sure, but like not that, I'm not like so driven to go there. And then within like 6 months, he'd had so many young people write to him and be like, this record has, it's like got me through depression. It's got me through breakups. It's got me, and that's when no one really even knew who Glenn was, So it was the music. It was just, he was getting these like emails. And I think that's when he was like, oh shit, this record is, this is my time. And this record is a thing that the world needs right now,
Yeah, that sort of like intergenerational element that you feel through the film, you see in the band. Yeah, I mean, I heard the music before I saw your film, and I felt connected to the music. To see who was behind the music, it like put a lot of pieces together for me. Definitely.
Right? Yeah. I remember the first time I spoke to Glenn on Skype, and it was like, oh, this all makes sense. Like, I can see how this person made that record. But the other thing I would say, insofar as like, anyone that's pursuing any kind of like creative journey, Glenn like never stops making stuff, like, and I think there's something he's been making and making without any recognition and without financial, without any financial rewards for so long, but just keeps going and does it for the, for the process and the enjoyment and all of these things, which I know is a like utopian thing to say, but I do think it's something we can all take from that.
Definitely. I mean, it's kind of the hope of art, I also wanted to ask, because we have, some students, middle school, high school, watching this. I'm curious, like, what do you hope that artists do? Like, you answered some of it, but what do you hope that artists take away and learn from your film? And what do you think specifically maybe people who want to be filmmakers take from your film?
I think for artists in general, I feel like looking and meeting the people in that film, like both Glenn and the band, like they move through the world with so much kindness and with so much attention to each individual person that they interact with. And with so much, like there's just like a real gentleness to them and a real attention to detail, and a real kind of like, we're here in this moment doing this thing. And if we're playing to 30 people, if we're playing to 300 people, if we're talking to one person, if we're talking to 500 people, we do it with the same amount of like care and attention. And I really believe that, like, as anyone making anything, and I feel this so strongly, it's like, if you touch one person, then you're good, and I think that's a really important lesson for people to learn, is that, like success, like what is success? Success is like connecting to someone, and you can connect to one person and change them with your art, and like you've done a great job, so I would never forget that. And then as far as filmmakers go, God, I don't know. I think I think following, it sounds like, again, a very like obvious and cheesy thing to say, but like really following your gut a little bit, you know, because I definitely did that with this project, and it was something that no one wanted to fund and no one wanted to, you know, give me the time of day about. So I think that I'm a real believer in filmmaking of just trying to making, you know, and if you feel compelled to make something, gather people together that care about what you're doing and do it, and try and do it without money for a bit if you need to, you know, because I do think that's like a real, you know, you can make films with very small means, at least shoot them, and maybe it gets harder further down the line, but at least you're doing it, you know.
You can get something out in the world.
Get started, yeah. And even if that's just like calling someone up and interviewing them on Skype and getting the audio and then pulling some reference images, like that's filmmaking, you know. So just that thing of like, don't get too stuck in your own head, trying to make perfect treatments or like have the most perfect idea or have an idea that everyone thinks is great. Like if you feel something, just try and make something, and like don't beat yourself up about it so much.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. It's kind of like following your intuition with it, not waiting for other people also's approval when you want to make something.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like other people's responses, like maybe some responses to the documentary that you didn't expect or that really resonated with you, from audiences, maybe queer audiences, straight, cis audiences, trans audiences, anything that stands out.
I think like one thing that I found really special about this film is that I've been to quite a few screenings where people have like brought their parents and stuff, or have like shown it to their grandparents. And there's a really funny, like my mom is like 75 now, I think, and she's in this weird generation that I'm totally noticing now, where like a lot of her friends have got trans and non-binary grandchildren, and they're freaking out. And it's like that generation, that like older generation that have, you know, access, they're just getting terrible press, and they don't have access to anyone from the trans community or the non-binary, the queer community to have like real life conversations with. And this film, I think, has weirdly become like, I found that I've been giving it to a lot of like grandparents.
Reaching them
with grandparents. So I think, I don't know. I just feel like Glenn's like story has got so many different elements that connect so many different people depending on where they're coming from, you know, in their own life journey and their own identity. And I think that's part of why it's like much like his music, you know, his music is universal. And I kind of hope that the film can move that way too. And I really wanted the film to be a way for people to spend time with Glenn, because I felt so lucky to spend time with him. And which is again why I tried to keep like the interviews and stuff quite simple and not too overly edited, you know?
Yeah, it definitely feels like I felt like I got to know him throughout the documentary. And it does feel like very much like he feels like he's the center of it, and he's kind of walking, like feels very like both day in the life getting to know him, but like you're having coffee.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciated, because again, having heard the music but then not knowing who Glenn was, it like put it together.
Yeah. I really love that in filmmaking. I always quite often I'm like, I'm a low intervention filmmaker, but I love working with artists, because I love taking like, I love, you know, like the colorful sequences in the film are kind of like taken from the visuals that Glenn had made for Keyboard Fantasies in the first place, and the artwork that I'd seen in his house and stuff. So I love like it sounds like a little vampire, but I love like trying to build off what I learned from an artist, and then trying to like create a film world that resonates with that, you know?
Yeah. I think you did that really well.
Rather than trying to like dress someone up as something else, or like follow a format that I see as, you know, and like stick someone into a format that doesn't feel comfortable for them, you know?
The format felt like Glenn.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a question from someone watching.
Cool.
Wait for it to pop up. Mikey Glass asks, says, thank you for sharing this beautiful documentary and Glenn's story. The GSA at our school in Brooklyn loved it. We wanted to ask if you were still in touch with Glenn and how he's doing.
Glenn is good. Glenn turned 80 this year, which is so wild. And he is living with his wonderful wife, Elizabeth. They They are in Ontario at the moment. They've had a lot of struggles with their housing over the past like couple of years. They got really kind of, COVID hit them hard. I think COVID hit older people and young people, you know, like the worst almost. But he's great, you know. Him and Elizabeth are working on lots of projects together. He's been like doing a lot of he did some work with Elliot Page. So he's picking his projects, you know.
Gets to choose now.
Yeah, pick and choose, but also I think, you know, I'm going to say it because I always say it anytime I talk about him, like anyone that can support on a Patreon or whatever, like look it up, because he does, it's tough getting by, you know, and he had a lot of tours that got cancelled in COVID, and now he doesn't want to tour anymore because of the risk of COVID. So the one thing that I feel, you know, I wish he'd got more of his, I wish he got more of his airtime, because COVID really kind of nailed him, which is sad. But yeah, he's good otherwise.
But he's good otherwise. All right.
Yeah.
Good to hear an update. We'll look out to see if we have any more questions. But something I wanted to know is, like, a lot made it into the film. Like, I feel like we learned so much about him and his music and, you know, Keyboard Fantasies. But are there like stories about Glenn, or maybe moments from filming with him that didn't make it into the final cut of the film, but that you really love and you think people would want to hear about?
The one thing that always bums me out is like the scene where they're all dancing after the show, which is in my house, but the actual music that they're dancing to is Missy Elliott, and it's like so good, but we couldn't afford to license it. Like, we managed to license it for our festival run, and then they wouldn't give it to us for the proper release. So that always makes me sad, because I've got all this footage of Glenn just like getting down to Missy Elliott, and he's like never heard of Missy Elliott before, and he's like dancing around my room. So I've always wished that I could put that footage somewhere, but you know, the capitalist monsters say no.
Like, no.
Yes, like, definitely not. I mean, a lot of it went in, you know. A lot of it went in. There's some more, you know, there's some more. I think because it was my first feature, I was like super conscious of, I was like, every single frame's got to be super engaging, and like there's no space for anything. I was so nervous to take up space in a way, you know.
Yeah.
And I think there were some interesting, more in-depth details about his like upbringing in Philadelphia, and just like the context of Philadelphia at the time that I think I would have quite liked to build out a little bit more, because I think part of what's so remarkable about these elder stories is trying to like locate them in the cultural atmosphere of the 1950s, 1960s, you know.
Right.
So I think that's like an area where I probably like would have expanded on a little bit more had I had more time. But yeah.
How many months were you with them?
We shot it. I went out to Canada for like a week, and then we did that tour in the UK for another week, and then that was pretty much it. You know, it was like very little time, because we had very little money.
Right. I was also going to ask, like, what was the crew like for that, and how did you assemble?
When I went to Canada, I flew out on my own, because I'd make like commercial stuff to make money, and I got a cancellation fee. And I'd been trying for like a year to get someone to give me some money to go meet Glenn, and I got this money. So I was like, I'm going to go. So I just like went on my own, and I worked with a DP from Nova Scotia called Kevin, who was amazing, who I literally just picked off the internet, you know.
I love when that works.
There were two of us for the first thing, and then when we went on tour, it was myself, my producer Liv, a DP called Lee, and a sound guy called Danny, and we were in my mom's car. And all three of them worked for free. We gave Lee and Danny like £1,000 each when the film was completed. This film, I think it's important for students to know as well, this film never made, and it's not broken even. You know, it cost money to make this. I think we probably put like £30,000 of our own money into it. So I think that's, you know, and that's money that we make from doing commercial work. And I like to be like transparent about that, because I think that money is a big deal in filmmaking. So I make films for like Vogue of celebrities unpacking their handbags, and then we do that as a little production company, and then we put that profit from that into making our documentaries.
Got it. So it kind of sustains that way.
Yeah, and we won some arts funding as well. Like we won a small arts grant and did a small Kickstarter. So it was very much, you know, like beg, borrow, steal, which I think is okay to do for the right project in the right way. You know, like very transparent, very communicative. And the crew that I was working with were crew that I use on my commercial jobs when I can pay them really well. So that's also a really helpful way of making that situation feel okay. Because I might be like, I've asked you to do this project with me, but there's a paid project next month, you know?
You're right. It's kind of like you have that, you're supporting your crew in other ways. We actually have 2 questions I'm seeing. So we'll bring those on now. DJ Slay, are there any additional queer and trans musicians you love and recommend our GSA check out?
Ooh, Planning to Rock. I don't know if you know Planning to Rock. Planning to Rock are an incredible, incredible artist. They're 50. They've just turned 50. And they've been making music for 20 years. They've got 5 records out. And it's so beautiful because their record, I've been talking to them about a project, and it's just really beautiful because they talk about how when they look back at their musical history, they feel like their musical history was like almost giving them the message of their trans identity before they knew it. And it's very much like this sort of 20 years of them sort of like coming into who they are. And it's also just like really joyous experimental disco music. It's really good. It's very British as well.
I love that. Who was that? Say that.
Planning to Rock.
Planning to Rock. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look that up. DJ Slay also asks that maybe you're making another documentary about someone. Maybe what's your next project?
I'm trying to make a couple of. I'm trying a few different ones. I'm currently exploring trying to make a film about this woman called Norma Tanega, who is another incredible musician who sadly passed away in 2019. But I've been working with her archives and actually have been like working with her she went to school in Claremont, and I've actually been up at the university working with a history department to try and build an archive of Norma Tanega's work. But she has this incredible life story as well. So I'm just exploring that at the moment. But that's another musician you should check out, Norma Tanega.
Norma Tanega.
Another
okay.
Fabulous queer elder who is legend.
Some good things to look up after this. All right, we do have one more question from the viewers here. Leaping Llamas. Hi, I wanted to ask Posy, when did you know you wanted to make films? Did you always know you wanted to make documentaries, or did that happen because you found a person you wanted to make a film about?
No, I thought I was going to be a journalist. That was my big plan. I was going to be a writer, but like I just really like people and asking questions and kind of nosying around. So I thought I was going to do that, but I'm very dyslexic, so I can't write very quickly. And I realized that I can't write fast enough to do print. So at that point, I was like, okay. And it actually was back when Vice, when they weren't an awful company, right at the beginning, it was VBS TV, and they had this like tiny video department in London with like 4 people in it that were like running around making films who didn't know what they were doing. And I went and got a sort of assistant role there and learned there. So yeah, needs must.
Needs must, yeah. Final question is just, what is your favorite Glenn Copeland song and why?
Ooh. Wow. You know, there's this record called Primal Prayer, which they did re-release. But when we first met Glenn, he actually had it out on Spotify, but it was out under the name of Phoenix. He had it on this other artist name. So it's this record called Primal Prayer. And he wrote it after he had like this stomach thing happen, and he nearly died from it when he was like in his early 70s. And he wrote this record when he got back from hospital, and it's like a very ecstatic, like percussion heavy record. And there's a track on it called In the Image, which is like, it's like a club banger, but like all with like drums, like African drums, West African drum beats. And I love it. So like that record is really worth checking out, but In the Image is a good one. And then from Keyboard Fantasies, like, I mean, Sunset Village is the bass line of that song just like gets me every time.
I'm gonna look those up. I think I know the ones that are by Phoenix. I've seen.
Yeah. It's
Other-
good for dancing.
Yeah, I have to check them out when I feel like clubbing. This was so lovely. It was really great to talk with you. And I guess we'll sign off now. Thank you to people watching. Thank you for those insightful questions. And I hope you have a good one. Thank you, Posy, and thank you, NewFest.
I really appreciate it. Thank you all. Go make films.
Go make films.